Now, today, I want to clear with you to have a better understanding of all these things, because if not, all of us get ourselves confused. And consultant equally, we have cases where amount of consultant and consultant equally as confused as people in the market here. Now, so in my presentations, I'm going to divide into two parts here. Number one is, what is the confusion all about? Okay, number two is, then we have to understand what does each represent and the interrelationship. Now, let's look at what is the confusion. First of all, I'm sure many of you have come across this word KPI, KRA, OKR, KFA. Okay, KFA probably, and then you have key success factor, KSF as well. Okay, so there are quite a lot of terminology, but currently these are some of the 4 things that you will notice that I'm sure many of you have come across. Okay, I've even come across some people have interpretation what's KPI, keep people in view. All right, but let's keep to our original concept. What is a KPI and a KRA? Now, very quickly, a KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. All right, not Key Performance Index. Because a couple of years ago, I was reading through a star paper, and we have a reporter who talks about government initiative on KPI, and he came out and said KPI is Key Performance Index. Please remember, in the fundamental of performance, how we want to drive it, it stands for Key Performance Indicator. The KRA stands for Key Result Areas. Don't worry, I'm going to go into detail and explain to you what precisely it stands for. And of course, the most popular one is nowadays, which is the how we call the current fashion in the industry, the performance is called the OKR. And what does OKR stand for? Basically, it stands for a very simple thing: objective key results. All right, it is a simple interpretation to represent how things have to be done. And of course, the one that we have been using quite significantly called the key focus area. All right, now the problem here is, are they the same? I had people tell me just even last week ago, people say, oh, Anthony, you know, sometimes we use KRA, some people use KPI, some people use OKR, they are all the same. Now, this is very interesting because if we don't understand, everything looks the same, but in actual fact, they are all not the same. Okay, I'll go through and explain to you. So now, let's try to understand a little bit before we say they are the same, they are not the same. What are the same, what are not the same? All right. Now let's go into the next part here. So the problem, as I mentioned to you, is there are too many interpretations on what each represents. And sometimes it makes it very difficult to actually understand what is it we want to do. Some people say OKR, some people say KPI, some people say KRA, some people say they are all totally not the same. So this is actually the main issue today. And I hope that from these topics, you all can have a better understanding of what each represents. Okay. The next part is, we are also posed a question. Is OKR better approach? So that there's a typo. Is OKR a better approach than KPI? My apology for the typo error. Okay. Or OKR is better than KPI. Okay, so there are many questions related to these subject matters. Now, first of all, let's go back to something very fundamental. Why are we using all these things? Does it matter? Does it make a lot of things that is important in driving performance? Okay. Now, first of all, we use this because whatever we want, our intention was eventually to measure the performance. Okay, to determine how we want to drive performance. So typically in any organizations today, if you want to be following best practices, okay, you probably will realize that eventually we want to determine what is the final performance of an individual or even organization or even business unit. Now, the common platform basically is, in order to determine the final performance, you also have determined the individual performance, the organization and business unit. Then what we try to do is we try to find a combination is how to determine what is the performance. Now, if you look at 60-20-20, this percentage will vary depending on how to say which level you're in. Of course, if you are a top level executive, your staff performance will be probably only 20%. The 80% will come from organization and business unit. But if you are, let's say, an officer or a supervisor, probably your staff percent could be 90%, and the organization could be 10, 10, and so forth. So this is to make sure that it's very fair, because the doer, we should give more percentage for the work they do. If it's a driver, we want to measure how they drive to get the result that you want to do. So this is the tactical performance frameworks that we will look at it. Now, as for staff performance, basically there are three very important elements that determine whether you and I perform or not. So in order to understand KPI, KRA, I think we need to understand what does it lead to. It must lead to something. So basically, to get your staff performance, your own individual performance, typically in the industry now, it's based on three factors: work performance, competency, and other contribution. Now, of course, you notice here, I put that KPI framework. So some of you are going to question, look, Anthony, we don't use KPI. Okay, we don't use KPI. All right, but doesn't matter. Let's clear the confusion part. Now, the whole idea, what we want to do basically is this. All right, so eventually we want to see how to reward people. And eventually reward can come in two fundamental. One, it could be bonus. The other one could be increment. Now, don't worry too much about this. I'm just showing what is typical, what we call best practices that is used in the industry. Now, of course, eventually we decide to use OKR, KR, whatever we want to do. We must lead to a way to manage performance. Okay, when we want to manage performance, very important thing is they are basically rating. We have to decide how to determine whether people perform or don't perform. All right. Now, so basically, the one that you see here is called 5-point rating system. Now, what is 5-point rating system means there are 5 points in which you rate a performance of an individual. So if you want to do KPI, OKR, we have to eventually come out to assess. We are not only tracking, we are assessing the performance. So in this case, meet target, in this case, the rating is 3. Stretch target, in this case, the rating is 4. High performance target, in this rating is 5. Below target is 2. And poor target could be 1. All right. So these are typical example of how perform rating can be done here. I will start with a KPI. All right, key performance indicator. What is a key performance indicator? First, so once we clear the definition, then I think we have a better understanding. A key performance indicator, basically, the simple definition, it must have two components. You must have a measure and you must have a target. All right, so basically, first, let's go into the definition. So that means to say a sales revenue is not a KPI. Accuracy of delivery is not a KPI. Response time is not a KPI. All right, that means to say, which means to say we also have a target. Then we also need to know the target. Is it a meet target? In this case, I want to show an example of a KPI that represents a meet target. So of course, we can interpret in many ways. So in this case, 150 million is a meet target in this case. And I have made a decision that 150 million is a KPI, but it is to address whether we meet target or not. So the 95% here, it is also a KPI. Accuracy delivery means 95%. Response time means, in this case, I want to achieve 80% to the work standard of 3 working days. That means I want to measure how many of the responses, WS stands for work standard, that I can respond within 3 working days. So that means if there's 10 people call me, and I want to know these 10 people, when I respond to them, how many of these responses are done within the 3 working days. Whether I do it within half an hour, 1 day, 2 days, is still called done within 3 working days. All right, so that is basically what do you understand by KPI. All right, now, what is the problem? That is where it comes in. The problem here is this. Assuming I ask you the question, Anthony, what do you think are your KPI? Now, this is actually asking something which is very, very tough, because why? KPI is just a unit measure. But I will have difficulty to ask you, can you tell me what are your KPI? You go back, for example, you do performance appraisals, and one of the problems is that the boss asks you, what are your KPI? I think it's very difficult. But basically, KPI is important because it is where we can measure an outcome, the performance outcome, where you can measure whether how well you do. So let's agree one thing. So number one, KPI itself is very powerful, but to ask you the question, what is the KPI, becomes a problem. Now, that is where the next part is very important. The next part is very important because, okay, we must establish the objective statement. Now, I don't care what method you use. If you ask me the question, Anthony, which is more important, KPI or objective? I will tell one thing, KPI is not the most important thing. The most important thing is objective. Then I will show you where something comes in really. Now, in other words, it is impossible to come up with a KPI if you don't even know what are the objectives. You have to know what are the objectives. It could be one objective, it could be several objectives. Okay, for me, once you're very clear of the objective, if the KPI is wrong, we can always change the KPI. But if the objective is wrong, the KPI is as good as no use, because we don't go and measure something if we are not clear about what we want to do. So why many companies are having problems? Because they never start the right approach. So I don't care what approach you use, but more important, you have to be very clear of the objective. Now, the next thing comes in. Now, where is the difference and where the similarity? Now, basically, the answer is very simple. KPI is not equal to OKR, KRA, or KFA. But OKR, KFA, and KRA are just different approaches to define, to get you the answer that you want. All right? And each of them has its pro and con, because whether you like it or not, eventually, whatever method you use, whether it's OKR, KRA, KFA, you still have to come up with objective statement. Now, why the OKR came about was simply because in the last 10, 20 years, people are so emphasized on KPI, KPI, and they find that many KPI are meaningless, and then they find out they don't know how to do it. Even, for example, I'm a balanced scorecard practitioner. I'm a certified balanced scorecard. And one of the problems in a lot of people when develop balanced scorecard, they just got 4% and they came up with KPI. That is not the right approach, okay? You cannot do that. So basically, the key element here is the only similarity between OKR, KRA, KFA are just method. But OKR, KRA, and KF is not equal to a KPI. Now, what is important is OKR, KRA, KFA will eventually still lead to a KPI. Okay, it's just a method in which the information will be developed. All right. Now, please tell me, anyone are still clear of my explanation? Please key into the chat or just pass to Eugene and Jeanine, and then we'll try to answer. So are you quite clear? Can you please go to the chat and key in yes if you think you are clear? All right, just key in. If you think you're clear, just key into the chat. And if you're not clear, you can ask me. I will further elaborate and share with you what the whole thing are about. Because I do not know whether in your organization, because if you do processing organizations, many of you will find that these are the things. And today, I hope I can clear up many, many things for you. All right. So that is basically what it's all about. So before we go any further, all right. So I think I will then share with you. And of course, I'll give you my opinion about how certain things can be done. I've been practicing and doing this performance management framework for almost, I can say almost 20 years. All right. And of course, we learn the hard knock. And of course, as we go along, we will learn how to change and understand the methodology here. Okay, now, once we have done this already, let's look at OKR, because these are the fundamental issues that we are having. Now, what is an OKR? Okay, let's click on what is an OKR. Now, OKR is basically, it's just simply a method that states very clearly that we have already stated very clearly that objectives are very, very important. So when I develop organization KPI, I don't ask you what's your KPI. I will never ask you the question, what is the KPI? I will use certain method to do it. The OKR simply says this, that if you want to develop performance, you must know what are the objectives. And the OKR method is objective statement is considered as a driver. And as a driver, once you know objective, it must be supported by a key result or a set of key results. Now, this is very interesting. Now, this is an interpretation of OKR because the key result is actually the KPI in the definition of OKR. All right, all quite clear now. So I think we are all very confused. For me, methodology are matter. Number one, you and I must agree. How do you want to get performance? Okay. The performance is, it must be objective. So I don't want to ask you, what are your KPI? I will ask you, what are your objectives? Assuming if I want to ask you a very simple question, what are the objectives? All right. So basically, I'm sure many of you heard of this MBO, okay? MBO simply stands management by objective. Now, this is a methodology derived way back in the 90s. Now, what I'm trying to say, what you and I are doing, it's not something new, because it has been done many, many years ago. But of course, over the years, we learn to perfect the art of how we do things. So MBO simply management objective. Now, that is a very powerful method, because if you ask me, the only problem about MBO is it is so complex in which how you derive the objective statements. All right. And there was no guidelines of how objective need to develop. That was the problem in the MBO methods. MBO was very powerful. I don't know, anyone have heard of MBO? Can you just key in the chat? Anyone? Yes or no? Just key in for me. Have anyone heard of MBO? Have anyone heard of MBO? I'm sure. What is an MBO? MBO stands for management by objective. Now, of course, some of you are in the new generation. I belong to old generations. MBO was a method used quite significantly in the 90s. In the 90s, when organization wants to go about developing, they use a method called management by objective. It's simply like OKR, simply like KR, but those are the use there was quite an extensive exercise. Those days, it was big money for consultants to use MBO, and they go into organizations, they organize sessions to talk about management objective. But the problem with management objective is it is a good method, but there was no guidelines on how objective need to develop. All right. So basically, that is basically what it's all about. Okay. So I want you to be very clear. Don't get yourselves so bothered by all this. It's just that you must be clear what you want to do here. All right. Now, why company like Google's use OKR? Now, what is interesting is this. Sometimes many of us, we just follow blindly. But many of these top-notch companies, they already engaged consultants for many years to look at corporate strategy. Now, when you look at corporate strategy, which means to say many of these top-notch companies have a very clear objective already, how they want to drive the result. The clarity of where they want to go is already established. So that is why, like if you use Google or, for example, some of the top-notch company, all right, they can use OKR because the objectives are already known to them. Now the question is, I want to develop key result, but I know my objective. How do I go about doing it? So that is the reason why many of these companies are using it very successfully, is because the clarities are there. Now, the problem here now, let's say we decide to use OKR in Malaysia. I'm a startup company, I'm an SME, and then I say, okay, guys, let's do OKR. Now, I have no problem if you use an OKR on one condition. The management are very clear objective. In other words, you cannot simply say, let's think of our objective. No, you can't work this way. You must have an idea. You either do corporate strategy, you're really very clear, because in my balanced scorecard implementation, I always use OKR method in my balanced scorecard implementation. When I go company to help company to develop balanced scorecard using the balanced scorecard methodology. So what we do is you use a certain method, okay? Then after that, we develop the objective statement. Then from objective statement, we define what are the key results, or we want to call KPI in the extent of it. All right. So that is basically what it's all about. Now, let me just share with you. All right, hold on. So I want to click here. Okay. So in other words, as an example, okay, achieve a sustainable organization performance. All right. So typically how people use OKR will write improve revenue from 130 to 150 million. That's a key result. Or improve customer base from 200 to 300. So the minute you use OKR is that the way you write your key result, you have to put in the sentence forms. Generally, they do like this. Of course, eventually it's still a KPI, because your KPI is still revenue, 150 million. Customer base, 300 million. So sometimes we get ourselves very confused because there's so many ways to interpret something that we want to talk about. All right. So basically it is. Now let me share with you where are the area of concern. The area of concern is, problem is this. Assuming I go and get my management there, guys, let's use OKR. Can we decide what's the objective statement? Wow. I think that's the problem, because, okay, let's think of objective. How to think of objective statement in the first place? There must be a guideline. whether we want to have objective to do it financial and the objective to do it customer. The minute we do it this, that means we don't use OKR alone, we use something else. All right. So that is why. So that's why it's very difficult to consistently implement same objective across the whole organization. All right. So I think that's another problem. So the problem is sometimes this department have an objective, this department has an objective same, but the problem is the objective could be the same, but it was written in various different ways. All right. So that to give you an idea what it is used here. Now let me just share with you. If you look at the note here, the method used in Google is even more complicated as it's in full statement form. All right. So in other words, to be precise with you, the way Google use is quite similar to MBO. All right. But MBO was used way back in 19, but nobody thought MBO. But if you look at how Google use the method, it's quite similar to MBO, management by objective. All right, because man is written in full statements. All right. Now, I'm going to stop here for a while for you to reflect. Now, can you all see and tell me now, is there a difference between OKRA and KPI now? Can you see there's a difference now? Okay, just key in and tell me, or if you have a question, you post it, because no point we go any further. And then I think it becomes very difficult. So don't let people tell you OKR is better than KPI. Then you tell them, look, OKR are method, KPI are just an outcome. And one of the outcomes through OKR that you develop the method. All right. So any other question, please feel free to ask again. I will do my best. As I say, let's take this as an opportunity to explore possibility. Clarity and definitions are fundamental. We cannot do something where we are not clear of what we are doing. And I don't want, as an organizer, you don't even know clear and you do KPI. You're not even clear, you do OKR. So that's why one of the challenges in many implementing organizations is they ask people to come up with KPI. Actually, that's the wrong question, wrong approach. You always, but whatever method, you must always define what is a KPI. All right? What is an objective statement? An objective statement is not a KPI. Okay? So if you don't have any questions, let's go to the next part. Then what is a key result area? Now, this is very important because today's fashion, everybody talk okay, but never people talk about key result. I will explain to you how this, then of course we'll talk about key focus areas. All right, let's move on. Let's look at key result areas. Okay? Now, what is key result areas? Now, this theme came about simply because partly due to the development of balanced scorecard. Now, what balanced scorecard simply say is a method that focuses on broad strategic performance areas that will help organize to drive, align, and balance operational and human capital. Means we will look at how we're going to balance the performance of an organization. So from the strategy perspective, normally you ask, what do you think are your key result areas? All right. So these are broad areas that you want to look at it. So usually from Kaplan work, Kaplan defined as key result as three very important universal requirements. Number one, managing financial requirement. Now, I put it this way to make it simplified because I don't want to just show you the balance scorecard, but this is a simple interpretation of how a Kaplan want you to look at it. So basically, is this managing financial requirement. That's a very important key result. As an organization, you have to look how you can manage your financial requirement. That's a key result area. So key results are very strategic. It always sit at the top of an organization. Delivering customer expectation. Broadly, as a company, we've got to make sure we must help to enlighten customer, make customer happy. Then, I personally present this because I'll make it very simple. So Kaplan will present a different thing here, but these are the key. Doing the right thing. Doing the right thing means what? It's very important. What the key result area is to do things, to do the effective things. All right. Means when you want to achieve effectiveness, you got to make sure you do the right activities. That is called the right thing. Doing things right means you need to be efficient. So as an organization, you can keep asking to do the right thing. But we also make sure we do the right thing, eventually we're able to do the right thing efficiently. So that's called doing things right. Now, of course, in Kaplan, you don't see this. I just want to make it as easy for this first presentation so everybody want to know. And the fifth element is developing people. developing people is make sure that develop people here doesn't refer to I must have subordinate. Developing people in the context means you as well. So in a broad perspective of organizations, they will have to look at these key result areas. So once you have key result areas, you will eventually still have derived the objective statement. But the problem here in KRA method is so broad, which means to say I can have 2 or 3 objective statements in one key result areas. So take for example, in key result is managing financial requirement, objective achieve a sustainable organization goal. The problem is managing financial is not just about growing the business. It could be also looking at productivity, how to manage costs. All right. So basically is I told you already, I use all the method, I'm exposed to everything else, but I will tell one thing in this case, you still need to have a KPI. In this case, revenue. Of course, this is meet target KPI. So when you have KPI, very important fundamental is this KPI, is it a meet target KPI? Is it a stretch target KPI? I want to change the whole interpretation on how you define things. Very, very important thing. All right. So that is called a KPI here. Okay. Now, what are the area of concern? Now, it is easier than OKR approach, but it's still not easy to do objective statement. Now, remember I told you OKR. OKR means the organization must have clarity. You must have clarity. You don't have clarity, you don't know what you want, it's difficult. Now, key result area, okay, is much easier because I now very know financial, so I define what objectives should I come up with financial. Customer expectation, I able to come up what are the objectives should I derive from. So in this case, it is much, much easier than the OKR approach, okay? So many still apply it as though it is a KPI. It is not a KPI, okay? And basically that is one of the issue, okay? So that is very important to understand that how different approaches come about. Okay, any questions, guys? All right, any questions? All right, I hope that now, okay, no, okay, now I hope that you have now a much clearer understanding. I hope you have now much clearer what is a KPI, what is OKR, what is KRA. All right, now let's move on. Okay, let's look at what is key focus. Now this one probably many are not familiar, but actually all of you have been doing it without realizing it. So we call key focus. What are key focus areas? Now, key focus areas has only one interesting thing. It always look at operational, a method that focus on operational related area that have a performance impact on an operating unit or an individual. Okay, now let me just show an example of KFA. All right, so basically, what is a KFA? A KFA simply means to say that there are few focus areas from the operational standpoint. All right, one of the operations is how do we develop competent team? How do we manage human capital? How do you address corporate governance? How do we look at customer and service? How do we look at HSE and security? How do we look at human capital? How do we look at information marketing, operations, product, innovation, quality, sales, and stakeholder? Now, what you see here are quite generic KFA. 90% of most companies will have whatever operation, they will somehow related to some of these key focus areas, depend on the department here. Okay, so basically that is a typical key focus areas here. All right, of course, then what you need to do is from each key focus areas, I don't know whether, what's my time? Yeah, I see. Okay, I think I'm not going to go into detail now. All right, now I will skip this. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is that then from each key focus areas, maybe I just show a quick one. Now, this is now my how to say my standard of development because I find it's so easy to help company to do implement. So once I have a key focus areas, then I can able to impact each objective statement into a key focus area. So I can sit down. Okay, first of all, I will sit down. Guys, let's talk about operations. What kind of objective you want? Let's talk about quality. What kind of objectives that you want to do? All right, so things like this. So let's go back here again. All right, so basically that is one advantage. So that's how I do my interpretation, how I do my implementation of key focus areas. Now, what is also each key focus can have impact more than one key result area. Now this is quite interesting. But if a company wants to say, okay, we want to have KRA, but we also want to have key focus areas. Now, this is where this becomes very important. We can do a mapping. A mapping means we will look at key focus areas, and then we map again the key result areas. Then we now understand and understand how does each key focus is relate to key result areas. In this case, effectiveness, you notice there are 9 key focus areas that has impact of effectiveness. All right. There are 3 key focus areas that impact on efficiency. All right. So basically, just is to give you an idea what the whole thing's all about. Now, short of time, I'm going to move on. All right. Now, the trick today basically is very simple. From an individual standpoint, okay, whether a department or individual, we find that we try not to have too many key focus. And now this is a very important part because sometimes I ask people, everybody tell me everything is very important. No such thing. Because in other words, you have to be very clear what are the things that impact your performance, impact you. So usually, if I were to do a different exercise, I would tell my client, please, in department individual-wise, you try not to have too many key focus areas, between 2 to 5. You can have too little, but 2 to 5. And the worst case I ever come across is 6. The meaning you have too many means you're not focused. Okay, too many doesn't mean it's good. Okay, so this is one example. Sales and business. Objective, achieve, understand, organization perform. KPI could be sales revenues, target, okay. So these are some very interesting. So key result will be doing the right thing. In this case, I might want to look at customer, how do I grow? So in other words, this method becomes very powerful because it allows you to look at an objective statement now with a combination of measures and depending on which areas you are focusing on. All right. Now, hold on, let me just shift this thing up a little bit. Okay. Now, so basically there are tremendous advantages. I will tell you why, because throughout all my implementation, I use a combination of methods, but eventually I find that key focus areas is the easiest to implement. Whether the company has corporate strategy, we can align to it, but whether the company don't have corporate strategy, we still have a method to derive instead of ask people, let's use OKR. So very often I find implementing using OKR without a clear understanding becomes a problem. Number one, of course, first of all, you can have presets, okay, of objective statement. Number two, you focus on what are the number of key focus areas you want to do. Like in this case example, take for example, manager projects. So in manager projects, in this example, there are only 4 key focus areas. He has to make sure his project runs efficiently. His project must deliver with quality. He also had to make stakeholders, which means suppliers, contractors, and things like this. You got to make sure as a manager, his team must be well managed. So in this case, once you have the key focus areas, the next thing you need to do is come up with the objective statement that require, and of course, you can then look at preset objective statement. All right, so this is one. And of course, what happened is, you can come in, and then later part, we can also embed the measures. So in this case, which means to say that I will now be very clear. So take for example, I have key focus areas. So these are the 4 key focus areas. I have my objective. Then from my objective, I come up with possible key result areas. So in this case, the key result, the measures, in this case for operation efficiency, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. For quality, there are 2 measures. For building relationship is timely payment, and the third one could be personal development and individual here. I'll say that will give you an example of what key focus is all about here. All quite clear, huh, guys? All right. Now, with much ado, because of short time, I will allow you to have more question and answer. Of course, in this case, let's go back again here. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm not supposed to do this. How do I go back? Okay. So anyway, I will back here again. Sorry. So now this is basically what the whole about. So let's do a quick summary. OKR, KRA, and KFA are methods. This method eventually will end up with developing many things, and KPI is one of the things that using this method. Now, whatever method you use, you still have to develop objective statement. Okay, it's just that it's a different way of doing things. Each of us have different way of doing things. All right. Okay. So let's go back to the main. Any question, guys? Before we move up, that I'll share with you. Any more questions?
Yeah, Anthony, since you said that, we actually have a question here. KFA method doesn't seem to be any different from the OKR method. Both have objective statements leading to measures. So what would be the difference?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Eugene, maybe you repeat that again so everybody clear what is the state.
Okay, sure. It says here, so it seems like the KFA method is no different than OKR. Both have objective statements leading to measures. Can you explain that?
Okay, now basically it's like maybe I didn't elaborate well enough. Now basically it's this, whether you use OKR or KFA, okay, you still come up with objective and measure. Yes, that's precisely. Now what is the difference here is that in a KFA method, you have a method to develop objective statement. That's the only difference. So in the KFA method, you have a method. In this case, the method is the KFA method. Okay, so the only difference in OKR is after that, whatever you do is the same, because the OKR method is, there is no method to develop an objective statement. So if you were to do, that means to say, either you do something else first, means you do a corporate strategy, you do a corporate alignment, then you have the objective statement. Then after that, you can use the OKR method. Now, my answer to you is this. If you try to develop an objective statement where your organization have not gone through a formal process or looking at corporate strategy, come up with performance frameworks and things like this, then the OKR method will be very, very difficult. Okay, Eugene, I hope that I have answered that question here. It will be very, very difficult to do that, because what it means to say is that the OKR method is actually quite similar to KFA. The only difference is KFA got one more step ahead to help you to develop the objective statement, because once you're KFA, you then come up with a set of objectives, and this one all can be customized. So which means to say, assuming I want to do alignment for the organization, the KFA method will help me. Means I have sales department, production department, finance department, operation department, product, everything, I can align them. So which means to say, you see a KFA method, which means to say, assuming I'm a head of any department, every head will have to achieve high level operation efficiency. So which means to say, and each of them have the objective statement. However, each of their KPI, because of different operations, the KPI might not be the same. Now, what we do not want in the what you call the KFA method, the OKR method is number one. Unless you are Google's, unless you are a top brain company where they spend millions of dollars getting consultants to do corporate strategy, to achieve clarity, to know where you want to go, to know the challenges, OKR is perfect, because I also use this method in my balanced scorecard implementation. So in my balanced scorecard implementation, but first of all, before we can do it, we look at corporate strategy first. Then after that, we use OKR. So Eugene, just to share with you for whoever asked the question is, actual fact, every of this method, whether it's OKR, will lead to KPI and objective statement. It's just a question how comprehensive, how much clarity you want to do. The answer is very simple. If there's no clarity, everything you develop is not going to lead you anywhere.